Honored and distinguished speakers, panelists, partners, and guests, friends new and old. I'm James Hsu, Legal Counsel and Director of Programs of ARDN, the African Renaissance and Diaspora Network based in New York. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to this third Women of the Diaspora Summit. Translation into French will be available through the Zoom interface after we've worked out a few technical difficulties. The Women of the Diaspora Summit series of summits are convened within the framework of the ARDN Red Card campaign to put an end to all forms of discrimination and violence against women and girls. You will learn more about the Red Card campaign throughout today's proceedings and can sign the Red Card Pledge at www.redcardpledge.com. The topic of the present summit is COVID-19 and mental health. Today's program is divided into 4 parts. It will begin with opening remarks from the summit co-organizers, ARDN, UN Women, Unfpa, and the Republic of Costa Rica. Dr. Jibril Diallo, President and Chief Executive Officer of ARDN, will deliver the welcoming remarks and introduce our honored speakers from the summit co-organizers. After opening remarks will be a statement from our special guests, Ms. Gabriela Ramos, UNESCO Assistant Director General for Social and Human Sciences. We will then transition into what I know will be a dynamic panel conversation moderated by Dr. Elizabeth Strobel, Chancellor of Webster University based in St. Louis, Missouri, in the United States, and Ms. Sarah Branco, Legal Advisor and Project Assistant of the Center of Studies in Labor Relations and Inequalities in the Republic of Brazil. The distinguished panelists will be introduced by the moderators, and we encourage you to submit questions that you may have in the chat box, which the moderators may draw upon. After the panel, the moderators will read a call to action, which will encapsulate today's proceedings. Finally, Dr. Jibril Diallo will call the summit to a close. Videos of the Red Card campaign to end all forms of gender-based discrimination and violence will be interspersed throughout the program. There will also be a short video or two from UN Women about the impact of COVID-19 on domestic violence. Before we proceed, it is important to recognize that people facing mental health challenges often suffer in silence. So if COVID-19 or anything else in your personal or professional lives is affecting your mental well-being in any way, we want to let you know right now that you are not alone, and it can and will get better, and help is available. Now, without further ado, please roll the ARDN Red Card video.
The African Renaissance and Diaspora Network serves as a coordinating body to unite the efforts of individuals and organizations towards a single purpose, which is to unite African nations with people of African descent, wherever they are around the world. The African Union Commission declared the diaspora as the 6th region of Africa. And for that purpose, our work is to make sure that there's a strengthening of ties between Africans inside the continent, the physical continent, and people of African descent. One of the major goals of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is SDG 5. SDG 5 has as a goal to bridge the gap between women and men. We therefore have called on the convening powers of sport and culture in order to help us bridge the gap between women and men. And within that framework, we have a major campaign, the Red Card campaign, a partnership between the United Nations system, FIFA, governments, civil society organizations, Webster University under the leadership of the Chancellor of the university, and other institutions to give a red card to all forms of discrimination and violence against women and girls. You can go to this link in order to sign the pledge to be part of that movement, that campaign internationally, and the link is www.redcardpledge.com. Thank you very much. And dear colleagues, I would like to also acknowledge the presence of the co-organizers of this very important summit. The first Vice President of Costa Rica, Her Excellency, FC Campbell Barr, who's always gracing us with her presence. We have also Dr. Jana Keita, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, Deputy Executive Director of Unfpa, present, and representing UN Women, the third co-organizer, we have Roberta Clark, who is the Roberta Clark, who is the acting regional director of UN Women for Eastern and Southern Africa. And dear participants, you're most welcome. My opening remarks will be very, very brief. I'll start by providing a context to this summit. Since 2018, the United Nations has promoted human rights in the context of mental health. We have the resolution of the Human Rights Council 36/13, which recognized that persons with mental disorders face widespread discrimination, stigma, violence, and the like. Women of the diaspora are primary victims of many forms of injustice, from racial biases through economic insecurity to discrimination based on their gender and their race, all of which increase their vulnerability to mental health. As a community, women of the diaspora do not often tend to seek services or help because there is a real stigma attached to mental health issues. And we all know that this situation has been seriously compounded by COVID-19. We know the statistics, so I will not really delve into them a lot. I can just say a few of these points. One is that globally, 70% of frontline health workers are women. And these women face high risks because of COVID-19. They have also been hit hardest by losses of job and unemployment. Confinement has also increased gender-based violence at alarming rates, especially in Latin America and the Caribbean. Now, on the summit concept itself, symbolically, we couldn't have chosen a better month than March to hold such a gathering on gender and race, especially in this particular time, this critical time of COVID-19. First, of course, it's in March that we have March 8th, the International Women's Day. And as you also know, March 21st has been declared by the United Nations as the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And we are also very, very happy that this third summit of the African Renaissance in Diaspora Network is being held within the framework of the 65th Commission on the Status of Women. The 1995 Beijing Declaration stressed that the interconnection between gender and racial discrimination causes higher vulnerability for women and girls, and it leads to violations of all areas of their social lives. We have written to you about the goals of this virtual summit. So I will only mention quite a few of the objectives that we would like to get as we end this summit. The first one is we would like to shine the light to bring more awareness on the challenges posed by mental health issues among the women of the diaspora. Second point is we want to really focus more on the interrelationship between COVID-19 and women of the diaspora as far as mental health issues are concerned. And we also want to call for more culturally competent and affordable services for women of the diaspora. We want to raise the awareness about the impact of gender and racial discrimination on the mental health of women of the diaspora. And all of that within the framework of the initiative of ARDN to accelerate the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals using SDG 5, that is gender equality, as entry point. Finally, as my colleague James Shu mentioned, this initiative, this summit, is within the framework of two major initiatives that we are promoting to popularize the Sustainable Development Goals in Africa and in the diaspora. The Women of the Diaspora Summit Series engage leaders shaping the future, addressing the range of issues captured in the 17 SDGs. They give voice to global intergenerational experts, and you will note that the two co-moderators are symbolic of this intergenerational dialogue, a youth leader, and then a leader recognized in the world as Chancellor of Webster University, using SDG 5 as entry point. The first two summits focused on gender and racial discrimination on the one hand, and economic equity on the other. The second initiative in this connection is the ARDN Red Card campaign that my colleague James Shu has already mentioned, which is we want to give a red card to all forms of discrimination and violence against women and girls. And we want, by the FIFA World Cup of 2022 in Qatar, to collect 1 million signatures. And you can go online and pledge your agreement to this by going www.redcardpledge.com. Thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to introduce the first Vice President of Costa Rica, Her Excellency FC Campbell-Barr. You have the floor, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Jibril. It is an honor, dear friends and participants. It is an honor for me to participate in the third Women of Diaspora Summit, an event presented by the African Renaissance and Diaspora Network and co-organized by the government of Costa Rica and the United Nations Population Fund. Costa Rica actively joins in highlighting the importance of universal health insurance as a requirement for the right to mental health as necessary condition for well-being and physical health. As you know, women of African descent are primary victims of many forms of injustice, from racial bias, economic insecurity, and discrimination based on their gender, which increase their vulnerability to mental health challenge and their sense of well-being. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Black women have experienced even greater threats to their mental health. The statistics of mental health condition were already alarming prior to this pandemic. It is estimated that depression affects 264 million people in the world, and it's also estimated that people with serious mental condition die between 10 and 20 years earlier than the general population. It is considered that worldwide there are less than one mental health professional for every 10,000 people, and only the 2% of the health budget is intended for mental health. Women and girls are particularly affected by this pandemic and are enduring as much of stress at home. The lockdown, the closure of schools, and members of the sick family have put additional pressure on women as the main caregivers. It is in the Latin American, the Caribbean women spend 3 times as much time as men doing unpaid domestic and care work each day, between 22 and 42 hours per week before crisis, and also represent the 72.8% of the people employed in the healthcare sector, which are groups that are exposed to greater risk of stress and anxiety. Therefore, we urgently need to work together with international organizations, the private sector, non-governmental and community organizations. Mental health service must have human rights approach, recognizing the diverse identity of all the people, guarantee equality and non-discrimination. Costa Rica has taken important steps toward universal access and coverage of the mental health care service, but COVID-19 has made it clear that we must make greater efforts on this regard, particularly in those women on whom the cost of pandemic has fallen disproportionately: African descendant women, indigenous and rural women. During this time of great challenge, accentuated by multi-phased impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, it is inspiring to see key actors from government, business, and civil society come together to reinforce the collective action need to women empowerment in this decade of action. The principle of leaving no one behind, set forth by the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, is not only a call to reach the most vulnerable first, or to allow the full, equal, and meaningful participation on those who are benefited of affected by decision, but to truly engage the voices, expertise, and capabilities of all actors of society. In this time urgent of action, I call upon to make a civilization jump into the 21st century, but putting women and girls in the center of our recovery efforts, and to place gender equality as an objective for all members of society. In this endeavor, the private sector have a key role to play. Today, I'm pleased to announce that the Costa Rica will launch in the coming weeks a regional alliance for women mental health. Our objective is to generate action to the promotion of women mental health, psychosocial support, and attention to their mental health from a gender, human rights, and diversity perspective, placing a special emphasis on mental health care during and after the pandemic of COVID-19. The Costa Rica public health system, which covers 95% of our population, was founded on the basis of universality, solidarity, and equality. I invite you to take these principles as a reference so that we can build all over the world mental health service. In Costa Rica, we are convinced that the realization of right of health involves ensuring universal and quality mental health service with community and human rights approach. Thank you very much, and congratulations, Jibril and the network for working hard with the issue of women mental health, especially those service thinking in Black and women of color all over the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Madam First Vice President. We are honored to have your presence here, and your inspiring leadership is contributing to strengthening the ties between Africans in the continent and Africans in the diaspora. We want to thank you for your leadership and for taking time out of your very busy schedule to always grace us with your presence. We don't take it lightly, and we're most grateful to you. On behalf of the organizers, we want to thank you again. Thank you very much, Madam Vice President.
Thank you, and bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Her name is Roberta Clark, and she is the Acting Regional Director for Eastern and Southern Africa for UN Women, a co-organizer of this summit. Roberta Clark, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and Excellency, Ms. F.C. Campbell-Barr, First Vice President of the Republic of Costa Rica. What an honor to be here with you. Dr. Jibril Diallo, President of the African Renaissance and Diaspora Network. Dr. Deanne Gator, Unfpa Deputy Executive Director, colleagues, friends, sisters, brothers, everyone. I bring greetings on behalf of the Executive Director of UN Women, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka. UN Women is pleased to be a co-organizer of this event. We believe that mental health must be recognized as a vital component of health and well-being. Yes, women cope. Yes, we endure. We take care of others. Many triumph in the face of overwhelming odds, but we dare not take women's strengths for granted. We dare not continue to undervalue their contributions to the care, formal and informal economies. Rather, our collective responsibility is to support women as they resist oppression and demand voice, choice, safety, and wellness. COVID-19, as we've heard already, has heightened mental health pressures on women who live the experiences of exclusion, marginalization, and discrimination. Whilst they have the highest burden of care, women's employment has been disproportionately affected by COVID-19. So, for example, during the first month of the pandemic, informal workers in sub-Saharan Africa lost an average of 81% of their income. 81% of their income. Housebound families have increased the demand for women's domestic work and unpaid care. And already before the pandemic, women spent about 3 times as many hours on unpaid care and domestic work as did men. And we've heard already that increased household tension and isolation at home has increased violence against women. Women who live at the intersections of gender inequality, racism, colorism, and income inequality are particularly affected. This is especially a risk for women of African descent, given the living legacies of historical violence and the continuing structural inequalities within which we live. Women who live at the intersections of gender inequality are particularly affected. So assessments supported by UN Women in East and Southern Africa found that in most countries, women are more likely than men to report suffering from mental and emotional stress, or that someone else in their household is having these kinds of problems since the onset of the pandemic. At the very same time, the pandemic has exposed the lack of public health support for women's mental health. Few other mental health resources are available, particularly for women in Africa and women of the diaspora. So women around the world are demanding and taking action to promote mental health. We say, let's break the silence and banish the stigma. We can be stronger together by sharing our difficult experiences and ongoing struggles. Together, we can expand the availability of mental health services and ensure that they are equipped to provide us with meaningful and culturally appropriate support in response to the intersecting race, income, and gender inequalities. We must strengthen public health systems. National governments must recognize and increasingly take responsibility for addressing mental health issues with an intersectional lens. To build back better, we cannot ignore this challenge. Let us take action together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Roberta Clark, for such a powerful statement. We're very, very honored and very excited to have this very strong relationship with you, representing here the Executive Director of UN Women, my dear sister Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka. And we look forward to working with you and your colleagues for the 2 forums for generation equality, the one in Mexico later this month, and the one in Paris. We're most grateful for your participation today, and I would like to thank you again. The next speaker is Dr. Deanne Gator, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, Deputy Executive Director of Unfpa, a personality who has had tremendous experience, not only of working in the field, but also of working in interagency affairs in other United Nations agencies like the UN Development Program. So we're very, very honored to have you today, Dr. Gator, address this third Women of the Diaspora Virtual Summit on behalf of Unfpa. You have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Jibril Jallow. Always a privilege to be with you. Your Excellency, Campbell Barr, Madam Vice President, Republic of Costa Rica. My dear colleagues, ASG Gabriela Ramos and Roberta Clark. Distinguished panelists, guests, dear friend, and esteemed colleagues. I bring to you the warm greetings from my Executive Director, Natalia Kanem, currently on field trip visiting the furthest behind as the champion of protection against sexual harassment and sexual abuse. The pandemic has put immense pressure at all levels: health system, supply chains, economy, and most of all, communities and individuals. It exposed many flaws and gaps in the way we address health and exposed decades of neglect to mental health systems. Fear of infection, physical distancing, isolation, economic losses, losses of loved ones. This is no way a complete list of factors and triggers that result in an increase in the number of people suffering from mental health issues. New challenges, such as social distancing, also created new barriers for access to services and complicated existing supporting mechanisms. Gender inequality and its manifestation affect mental well-being and puts women and girls at higher risk of mental health and psychological needs. On average, women reporting 2 times higher rate of mood disorder, depression, and anxiety compared to men. Women and girls carry disproportional burden throughout the pandemic as caretakers and as frontliner health workers. As those struggling the most, combining job and family tasks and facing denial in access to resources. As those affected most by an increased incidence of gender-based violence and disrupted maternal and family health care services. Research done by Unfpa shows that COVID-19 has been a disaster for women's health. 12 million women lost access to family planning services, leading to 1.4 million unintended pregnancies. And as we know, the gender-based violence is on the rise, as also proven by our data. In Americas, the data also show that this pandemic has disproportionately impacted communities of color, including essential workers, large proportion of whom are women of color, and they indeed are more likely to report symptoms of anxiety, depressive disorder, and other mental health issues. Owing to a lifetime of marginalization and systemic discrimination, communities of color have been disproportionately infected and affected by COVID-19 and facing devastating economic downturns. The prevalent racism targeted at people of color, particularly people of African descent, is yet, unfortunately, another compounding factor for the increase in mental health needs in this community. This is more concerning considering communities of color, particularly women, historically have challenges accessing quality health, including sexual and reproductive health and mental health. Women's mental health and psychological well-being is directly linked to the health and safety of families and community. The need to recognize the mental health issues and provide psychological support for women and girls is acute, now more than ever. Unfpa is adding an additional focus on strengthening psychological and mental health services in its intervention, including to the survivor of gender-based violence and in humanitarian setting. But the ripple effect on the pandemic is adding new challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, we must realize we cannot achieve the highest attainable standard of health without mental health approach. For women and girls, this also means access to quality sexual and reproductive health, as without that, we cannot sustain a mental well-being. Dear friends, this crisis is a wake-up call, and thank you for ARDN, because this is a call for action, providing government, civil society, and multilateral agencies an opportunity to confront this important reality, enabling multiple stakeholders to come together to strengthen and improve mental health programs and services. Costa Rica is giving great example by walking the talk. We must seize this moment. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gator, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, Deputy Executive Director of Unfpa, for your unwavering support to the African Renaissance and Diaspora Network from its inception. And we would like, through you also, to thank the Executive Director of Unfpa for her strong support, without which the work of ARDN wouldn't be where it is today. And in your office, we have a very strong individual who really represents you very well, Dr. Nihina Mutean, who is also our liaison. I want to make sure that I put on record, through your excellency, our appreciation to her as well. Thank you very much for your strong support, and we look forward to continuing the work with you. Thank you. And it is now my pleasure to introduce our special guest for this summit. She is the Assistant Director General of Unesco and a personality who has tremendous experience in terms of not only dealing with the developing world, but adding the convening power of culture to the issue that we are dealing with, which is using SDG 5 as entry point towards the broader issue of popularizing the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in the world. So please help me to welcome our special guest, ADG Gabriela Ramos. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Diallo. And it's really a privilege to follow my dear friend Tien, the Deputy Director General, and also Dr. Clark and the Vice President. And it's really a pleasure to be here. And I want to thank the African Renaissance and Diaspora Network for the chance to address you, and more than anything, for the chance to learn from you. And no doubt, this summit is focusing on one of the most difficult topics that concerns the right of women of the diaspora, their mental health, and the context of the COVID crisis that, as my predecessors who took the floor have really provided with extensive challenges that we are confronting. We need to start, and we should never stop recognizing the precarious conditions that certain groups had before the pandemic, and that were completely exacerbated. A pandemic might not be avoided, but the vulnerable conditions should not have been there in the way they have been. Poverty, violence, substance abuse, racism, discrimination, and in the intersectionality, as the previous speakers have said, women have always at the bottom, and women of color, women from minorities, women from my region, I am Mexican, Latin women, or from racial minorities even more. 1 year after lockdowns began to be imposed across the world, a year of tragic loss of lives and livelihoods, we are beginning to project this legacy, and it doesn't look good. For the very first time in 20 years, we know that we're gonna have more than 130 million more people in poverty by the end of this year, and women are overrepresented in the poverty lines. We know that what the health impact is going to be in terms of loss of life expectancy. We know the violence against women that could not be escaped, and that grew from 30% in countries like France, where I am, to 50% in some other countries in the developing world, 35% worldwide. It is just so unfair, because this is not related to the pandemic. This is just related to the causes of this discrimination that women have always suffered. Women have also been deemed essential in terms of sustaining the health systems, sustaining the services sectors that continue the society and the economy to operate, but they were not really recognized or paid as essential. So I would say that these jobs that are usually occupied by women need to be redressed and recognized. And on top, as we said, there has been this increase in racism and discrimination, attacks against people of different backgrounds. We are seeing this surge against people of Asian origin. I mean, this is getting worse. So I'm so glad that we are in this summit trying to look for solutions on how to put together an agenda for a strong recovery, and also to make up for the vulnerabilities that we had before the crisis. The COVID for us represents a pandemic superimposed on an historic epidemic of racial health inequalities and healthcare disparities. And there is no surprise, therefore, that there has been an increase on mental health disorders. And I recognize that this is a very important topic, because we will be over with the physical pandemic, hopefully, in the near future. But then we will have this weight of the mental impact that we need to be addressed very forcefully, above all for those that suffer more. And here, women again are core and center, and young women, girls, also will need to be taken into account. There has been a surge of mental disorders. There have been a surge of reported symptoms of anxiety and depression, 11% growth in the US, 10 to 19% growth in the UK. Of course, higher growth in those groups that have more touch. Black adults, Hispano or Latin, have also reported higher levels of anxiety, have higher levels of depression. The youth are really facing this with an acute impact in terms of their perspectives, in terms of their hopes, in terms of how much they will have the strength to continue and to fulfill their full potential. And there, again, we always fight with women at the lowest of the income. And then the women in diaspora. We know they are the most vulnerable, with less protection and often with more precarious jobs. They are the subject to blackmail and violence, and many diaspora migrants have no recourse to justice. And even though migration flows decreased during the pandemic, given the confinement, the women continue to run away from violence and despair, and therefore continue to be present in Women on the Move. And so we really need to think, how do we move forward and address this picture that we are not very comfortable with? And I would say this has been said many times by our dear DG of UN Women. We need gender lens to the recovery prospects of the post-COVID pandemic. We need gender lens to the recovery funds whenever they are decided. We need more investment. We need more support. We need more recognition to the contributions of women. We need to recognize mental health issues. But we also need to continue with this fight that these institutions that are present today have been building for years to ensure gender equality in the laws, gender equality in the institutions, to legislate equality and scrap laws that promote inequality. And we need bulletproof institutions against gender violence. And we need to make a special effort, because if we know that the impact of the pandemic has been asymmetric, we need asymmetric measures for the recovery. And we need to provide with more support and more help to those groups that were much more hardly harmed. And so undocumented migrant women, for me, is it's a group that we really need to take into account and argue how we could build the systems that could support them. We need to support, of course, all the networks of NGOs, all the networks of institutions that are providing with rooms for these women to heal, and also for the support systems that they need whenever they feel abused or attacked, or they are suffering all of these illnesses that our society has shown. So we know that migration is not gender neutral. is harder for women than for men. So let's work together to fight the systemic racism and discrimination that make it even harder. And so I really commend this discussion. I feel that we have the responsibility to look for those that are the most vulnerable. And there is always a women's face whenever we look into these different experiences that social groups are having in the context of the pandemic. So thank you so much for having me. Count on UNESCO. We will continue working on the different areas of our mandate on education, on culture, on social, human, and natural sciences, and in communications. And we will continue to try to advance meaningful agendas to support these groups. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Assistant Director General for UNESCO, Gabriela Ramos. We were very excited when we looked at all the responsibilities under your oversight at UNESCO, all of which contribute towards building inclusive and peaceful societies. The fact that under your responsibility, you have social inclusion, you have gender equality, you have youth, mobilization of youth, advancing youth development, and also the promotion of values through sport, anti-racist, anti-discriminatory issues. So those are all very exciting issues that we at the African Renaissance and Diaspora Network use as entry points towards pushing for the 17 SDGs. We were also very excited to see your role when you were at OECD, where you really made a very, very important contribution as Sherpa to the G20, G7, and APEC countries. So all of that make us look forward to working with you in three specific areas. One, we want to make sure that through your leadership, we work to give a red card to all forms of discrimination and violence against women and girls. And we count on your leadership to make sure that we get at least 1 million signatures to say no to all forms of discrimination and violence against women and girls by the FIFA World Cup of 2022 in Qatar. The second point is really we're using the mobilization of youth in this connection, and your experience there will be very, very important. And finally, your whole experience in the area of really dealing with gender-based violence is also another area which makes us very honored to have you today as our special guest, as our guest of honor for this third virtual summit of Women of the Diaspora, which is looking at the interconnection between COVID-19 and mental health. Thank you very much again, ADG.
Count on it, Dr. Diallo.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And you're welcome to stay as much as your time allows. We're now going to move on to the next item. We're about to see a brief message from Melissa Alvarado of UN Women about the impact of COVID-19 and violence against women, after which we will be moving to the panel discussions.
Before COVID hit, we know that violence against women is extremely common. It happens to 1 out of every 3 women in her lifetime. What we see unfolding right now is that domestic violence is really increasing because of all the strains related to safety, health, increased strains because of money worries and confined living conditions. So for some families, it's a really toxic mix of stress, of vulnerability. And we know that domestic violence is really about power and control, right, at the heart of it. And so people are trying to reassert that power and control. There's very frightening statistics coming out of countries worldwide. We're seeing, in some cases, tripling of cases, and those are staggering numbers. And so we're seeing women's rights activists, even government, flagging that this is a really serious problem. Service providers are having to be creative about how they get information to women. Women are having to be creative about how they seek support. In some places, women are going to pharmacies, right? The places people can go are grocery stores and pharmacies in most countries. And so they're setting up little pop-up crisis centers in grocery stores and in pharmacies to be able to respond to women's needs. Texts are becoming more and more important. So services are now reaching women in different ways through WhatsApp and through other types of, SMS messaging. And also neighbors and families are having to say, look, can I help? What we realize is really critical in this moment is making sure that women know which services are still working, because it's true that not all services are still working. And so we're working very closely with partners on the ground, frontline service providers, shelters, hotlines, police, health, all of these networks of supporters to identify who's still available and put that information right into the public view. And making sure that governments are not losing sight of this life-threatening issue, even during COVID, right? In a lot of countries, we're hearing that some women are going to hospitals or police stations and they're being told, not right now, please come back after COVID. And so we have to really be clear that we have to keep the focus on this issue right now, even during COVID. First, learn about domestic violence, understand what it is, understand some of the dynamics of violence that you might see unfolding in the lives of people that you know, and then understand what kind of supports people need when they're in that type of situation. If you see that violence is happening and someone's in danger, it's important to call the police. You can call the police, you can take action. And then finally, what I will add, if you want to show your support, you can donate your funds to support UN Women. You can support women's organizations like UN Women that are local. We partner with local organizations and frontline service providers like police, justice, health workers, social workers, and helplines across the world. And so we all have a role to play, right? It really is us being a village and supporting each other and communicating shared values at a moment like this.
It is now my pleasure to bring on board Sarah Branco, the co-moderator of the very exciting panel. Sarah Branco, please.
Thank you, Dr. Diallo, for the opening remarks and for introducing our special guests. Welcome, everybody, to the third summit of Women of the Diaspora, COVID-19 and Mental Health. I am Sarah Branco, and this is Dr. Beth Strobel, and we are glad to co-moderate this panel. Regarding the format of the discussion, we will ask everyone an opening question and request a brief answer of 1.5 minutes. And then we will pose questions to each one of you to highlight the causes of mental health challenges for women of the diaspora. You will then have 2 to 3 minutes to respond. We will explore the impact of COVID-19 and then close our discussion with best practices and solutions to these challenges. Now, I'm going to introduce our panelists. We are here today with Dr. Jamika Woody Cooper. She's an accomplished counseling psychologist, educator, entrepreneur, author, and civic leader. Sherry Ann Henry. She's a policy, research, and statistical analyst. She's also the founder of Love Your Skin, Appreciate Your Melanin, an outreach initiative geared at reducing skin bleaching in Jamaica. Fanta Anguiba, currently a PhD candidate pursuing a degree in social justice education at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, University of Toronto. She's also the executive director of the African in Partnership Against AIDS organization. France Francois, she's the founder of Enculturate Company, an organization working on peace building, racial equity, and conflict resolution in diaspora communities. Now, I'm going to start with the opening question, and then you feel free to answer. According to the US Center for Disease Control, discrimination, which includes racism, can lead to chronic and toxic stress and shape social and economic factors that puts some people from racial and ethnic minorities groups at increased risk for COVID-19. How do you see the impacts of COVID-19 on women of the diaspora's mental health? Go ahead, Dr. Jamika.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Well, the way that I would see that this occurs, there are many different ways or many different levels of discrimination. And the first level that I would say COVID impacts or intersects with just discrimination during the pandemic for women of color would be gender discrimination. And I think it's one of the things someone mentioned earlier today, but when you think about gender discrimination, you think about the types of jobs that women have in most countries. And usually those jobs overall pay more. Pay less. And then they are also less stable than maybe the jobs that their male counterparts have. So when you think about jobs that are going to disappear or downsize, it's usually going to be the jobs that the women have as opposed to those that men have. So that's one line of gender discrimination. But also women, someone mentioned this earlier, women are doing the bulk of childcare all over the world, regardless of level of education or level of income. There seems to be a constant thread of women doing the bulk of the childcare in the home. So when you combine other factors such as women having less stable careers and having less income, now some of these women losing their jobs or losing their employment or working from home, now you have them doing all of those things that they would usually do at home for children and possibly homeschooling as well in the United States with the virtual learning that we have. So gender discrimination is one piece. Then we have also economic discrimination that plays a role. So in the United States, what we've seen a lot of is COVID testing facilities or COVID vaccine resources in certain parts of cities, counties, and states. And most of the time that has to do with who lives in those areas. And usually it is not individuals who are lower income. So that's one piece of the economic discrimination. When you also look at, like me, I'm a psychologist. So one of the things someone mentioned earlier is the number of practitioners, mental health practitioners that are available. We know that we have a significant shortage of those all over the world, definitely in the United States. So for me as a Black psychologist, I am in the 5% of all psychologists in the United States. Only 5% of them are African-American. So when we look at an area where, like I live in the Midwest in St. Louis, where the numbers of African-Americans are 12 to 15%, we don't have enough practitioners of color who look like me to cover the needs of individuals in those areas. So again, that's economic discrimination. And then if we talk about cultural discrimination, we could think about cultural mistrust. So individuals who may be from racial and ethnic minorities that don't trust the practitioners that are available. So whether they're white practitioners or just individuals who don't understand their background and their values and their beliefs, and are able to see them as an individual and a person who should be able to honor their story and their situation. So lots of different levels of discrimination, gender, economic, as well as cultural.
So can I add on that?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. It's well said. My name is Fanta. And what I want to say also for the discrimination, I'm not going to repeat what have been said already, but there is also, we have to consider also language barrier, which is also one of the way to discriminate, and as well as the religious side also. So women are suffering on all that levels, and recognizing that we have the workload more than a man, some of them is not even recognized. That's also is something that we have to consider as a discrimination. Like you can be intellectual or non-intellectual, whoever it's been, you will come to work, after work you go back home and you will do your woman job, which is to taking care of children, as she mentioned, and doing all the housework, which is unpaid, is not even valued, and is not even recognized by society, if I can mention that. So all that is kind of violence and discrimination against women, not talking about the physical violence as well. probably we will come up with that. So this is what I want to add, considering language barriers and then religious barriers, all working together with the cultural sensitive way.
So
Thank
for
you,
me,
Fanta.
okay, sorry.
Go ahead, Prince. Go ahead.
No, it's Shari.
Go ahead, Shari.
Yes. So the reality is that, Black women, they tend to be amongst the most economically vulnerable during the crisis, right? So you look at the fact that many of them, the issue of unemployment it's huge. And I can also share the Jamaican context. When you look at the large proportion of Black females being employed by the tourism sector, and the truth is that the COVID-19 virus, it has impacted this sector. So many of them, they're sent home, they have no alternative means and ways to survive. So they're there trying to take care of the kids. And the reality is that they don't have the money to even buy the basic food items. So when you look at it, 90 USD, it can't really buy grocery for at least 2 weeks, especially if you're talking about a household where you have a single mother and 2 children and the different age cohort, of the children or the different age group of the children. So unemployment is a huge factor. And, after COVID-19 or during the pandemic, I think locally, we should embark on, the social research to justify our decisions moving forward. But on the face of it, this is what is happening. When you look at the fact that the mothers, they have to be at home with the children, trying to educate them. Many of them, they don't have the intellect, the capacity to teach the children. So there was heavy reliance on the teachers to do so. And the fact that the children, they're there, they can't attend to them, they can't teach them and develop their basic literacy and numeracy skills. And as I said, it's for some mothers, right? It's really affecting their mental health. The fact that, when I get up tomorrow morning, just putting myself in the shoe of a Black mother locally. When I get up tomorrow morning, the fact that I can't afford the gadget for my child to learn online, the fact that, the government rollout of the gadgets locally is so slow, it's really affecting, mothers as to how they try to cater to the educational needs of their children. Also to the fact that, to buy data locally, it is very expensive. So when you take these factors into consideration, unemployment and education, mothers not being able to fill the gap or to take on the role as teachers, it's hard for them to really cope with the virus. And whilst at the individual level that's a problem, but nationally we need to realize these issues and fine-tune means and ways to ensure that Black mothers from different communities, whether it be from the downtown area, whether it be from the rural area, to assist them to go through this virus, and to come out strong.
Thank you, Shari. I just want to expand on that from the Caribbean perspective. I worked in Haiti after the earthquake, and I can see so many similarities between the conditions of women post-quake, post-disaster in Haiti, and the current state of women's health and mental well-being during the pandemic. So we've seen an increase in domestic and gender-based violence as, shelter-in-place orders have forced more and more women to cohabitate with their abusers and limited the availability of shelters and other safe situations. And we've also seen an increase on the stress of parents and caregivers. What that means oftentimes for the women and girls in those households is that we're seeing an increase in physical and psychological abuse from parents and relatives. But this isn't only limited to the Haitian context. We know that a woman is killed every 2 hours in Latin America due to her gender. And this statistic has only increased in most countries in the region, like Brazil, Honduras, and Dominican Republic during the pandemic. Another unfortunate reality, as other people has mentioned, has been the economic impact. Haiti is still a largely rural society where most women work in the informal sector. So the lockdown brought a slowdown, of course, in economic activities that also caused a rise in tension in households, an increase in domestic violence, but also a decrease in economic input and for salaries and wages for people to be able to pay for things like food, school fees, and things like that. I think another really serious consequence that the pandemic has had on mental health is that we're seeing that Haitian women and girls are being asked to not only bear the brunt of the pandemic through household duties, but also in Haiti in particular, we're seeing that Haitian women and girls are also at the forefront of the fight for racial and social justice, both in and outside the home. So a lot of women and girls are reporting an increase in grief, fear, stress, and frustration throughout this process where they're fighting on both fronts, both in the home and outside of the home, for basic human rights and gender equality.
Thank you to all of you. The next question, and then these questions will be specifically to Dr. Jamika. ARDN's work is focused on polarizing the 17 Sustainable Development Goals among the members of the African diaspora. Sustainable Development Goal 3 deals with ensuring healthy lives and promoting well-being for all. Currently, the greater exposure to the virus due to dominance of women in the frontline healthcare workforce, the increase of domestic violence, and the high rates of unemployment are issues that disproportionately affect women of the diaspora. How much has progress towards this goal been disrupted, especially for undeserved and marginalized communities?
So the question is about how much progress?
And how much of the progress in the well-being of women of the diaspora has been disrupted because of the impact of COVID-19?
Well-being has been tremendously impacted here in the United States by COVID-19. I will definitely say the number of calls and emails and messages that I have gotten over the past 9 months regarding therapy has been 100% increase from what it was prior to COVID, meaning that more people of color are now reaching out to get counseling or therapy. So that's a good thing, but again, we don't have the numbers of providers to take care of the needs that we have. So one of the things that I've seen that's been really impacted has been the employment. So individuals who lost employment and or housing. So if you lose housing, you typically go to stay with someone else. Maybe you go stay with a friend, you go stay with a relative, but that is a big transition and adjustment for you and your children or your family. If you lose a job, of course, what comes with that is losing the benefits that you have with the job. So now what we have is people who are suffering more anxiety and depression as a result of COVID that may not have employment benefits such as health insurance to be able to receive services from that. So it's like a double whammy as far as the consequences of COVID. And then you also have, when people lose housing, then they have to live with someone else. Now you have larger numbers of people in those homes. So now at a time when people are supposed to social distance and stay apart from each other, they may be required and forced to live in close quarters with numerous people, which could again put them at risk because they cannot control the comings and goings of the other people that they live with. And one of the biggest things that I've seen as a result of COVID-19 for the well-being of women is the increase in anxiety and depression for patients that I've been seeing for years, and also new individuals who are just new to therapy because of the uncertainty of the pandemic. So not knowing when it's going to end, not knowing if they've lost a job, not knowing when they'll be able to get another job, not knowing when they'll be able to get a vaccine, not knowing when they'll be free to leave their home and to go visit their loved ones again. So a lot of the uncertainty about the end date and when things will change, or to be honest, if it would ever go back to what it was prior to COVID. So people have a lot of concern and worry about that, and just not knowing places people at a disadvantage, and it makes them more stressed, it makes them more anxious, more depressed. And I've seen a lot of individuals who have sleep issues. So their sleep is disrupted because they're lying in bed all night thinking about these issues and playing them over in their heads over and over again. And for some people who financially are impacted, they may be trying to think about possible options to get them out of this situation while the pandemic is going on. So I've seen well-being of women really impacted a lot since COVID-19. And of course, some of the things we talked about and Sherry mentioned about the childcare and women, that has also been a significant factor. Women who are now doing more childcare than they were before, in addition to maybe working outside of the home, and the feeling the pressure to have to do that now more and do it better. Because if you're at home all day, then sometimes people expect you to do more work or do better work in addition to your paid work that may be outside of the home. So lots of issues that impact the well-being of women.
Beth, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Panelists, you've helped us to understand the grim realities of the mental health stresses on women at the diaspora under all conditions and how those stresses have been heightened during COVID-19. Fanta, because of your work, we would like to explore a particular dimension of this. We know that you've served as the Executive Director of Africans in Partnership Against AIDS. And you've significantly contributed to decreasing the stigma and raising awareness for the need for treatment and addressing HIV/AIDS in a more open way. We know that those populations are at increased risk for mental health challenges. How have these isolating conditions and the threats of COVID-19 affected the quality of life and the mental health of those with HIV and AIDS, and particularly women?
Thank you very much for asking this question. As you mentioned, yes, I work with HIV/AIDS more than 2 decades. So we all know HIV itself is a stigmatization disease, and being infected with HIV/AIDS is kind of like death sentence way back. Not today, but way back at the beginning of the pandemic. So we were facing the same thing like we are facing now with COVID-19. The difference is like with HIV is like the discrimination and the stigma was very huge because people were had fear of being rejected by their own members, family, friends, and religious side. Could be mosque, could be church as well. So that fear was there, that stigma was there. So now adding on COVID-19, at least people are fear of COVID-19, not much as HIV pandemic at that time. Even though they don't reject you because you have COVID-19, but HIV, you will be rejected because you have HIV/AIDS. So combined with COVID-19 is a very huge and stressful moment that our clients are facing. So already we mentioned isolation. Already we mentioned mental health things. So the mental health is like double for somebody who is living with HIV/AIDS. Discrimination is like something that is death sentence, because if you have been isolated, if you have been judged, you have been pointed, rejected because of one disease, one virus, and then add another virus, you fear about your life because you're gonna say, okay, I have already a deficiency in my immune system, and then adding COVID, which is worse, am I going to die? That's the question I receive always. What am I going to do? What can you suggest me to do or to be? And within the distanciation and staying home isolated is more stressful for people living with HIV/AIDS. And because the interaction I have with my client was helping them to move on from the discrimination and stigma related to HIV/AIDS. But now that government forces people to stay home, they don't have any other avenue, any other opportunity. But what did I created is to do Zoom meeting or WhatsApp networking or even texting. I can, like, 24 hours a day, I am on my phone, texting, checking on them. They appreciate that, because without talking to somebody, you know, at that pandemic time, you don't know if the person is sick or if the person is not sick. So as somebody was saying, the house problem, if you lose your house, HIV/AIDS pandemic time, it was the same crisis we went through. But fortunately, I can say Canada government did a lot of positive work around COVID-19, not people to lose their house or their job. They don't have control on that, because it depends on where you are working or the enterprise you are working. But Canada government took initiative to support and help, and then give break for people, rent payment, for example, not to be stressed out, not to be, you know, and then give break for people. And the landlords, they understand that and they understood it, so respected. This at least help people not to go more into mental health issues, even though there is a mental health issues around. And vulnerability community is African and Caribbean and Black people in general, because we are the most disproportionately affected by any kind of virus coming into the world. So I have more to say, but we are limited to 2 to 3,
No,
2 to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Fanta. And I think the fact that you've used technology as a solution to the isolation fits perfectly with what we thought we would ask France next. So Sarah, back to you.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you, Fanta. France, ARDN has continued its global convening work during the past year using virtual technology tools. While technology has been an essential tool for communication, work, and services during the pandemic, it has also created potential areas of vulnerability for marginalized women, such as through online harassment, threats of violence, and Zoom bombing, which is the phenomenon of a complete stranger coming into your meeting or chat and wreak havoc. What can be done to address violence against women and girls facilitated by technology? And what priority does this take among other mental health crises?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. As an activist, I think we've all seen an increase in online harassment, as many of us have been using these online spaces to organize, to build community, because we aren't able to organize in person. I think what we have seen also is that some of the online threats, hate speech, and harassment that you mentioned, Sarah, have also led to real life threats and dangers for activists. We've seen community activists, Black activists specifically, in parts of Colombia, Brazil, Dominican Republic, and others killed based on threats that started off online and were ignored. I think what's really important right now as we consider human rights, especially in this UN space, is to consider how human rights and civil rights are being violated online, and social media platforms aren't being held accountable. There's very little redress or protection for Black, queer, and Indigenous and women folks as we navigate online spaces. Oftentimes, the kinds of threats and harassment we receive aren't considered priorities for social media platforms, quite frankly, because these platforms were created and envisioned by white guys who don't have the same cultural context. So I think that one of the things that is really important as our world is being shaped more and more by online spaces is really pushing these platforms to hold themselves accountable for the ways that our rights are being violated online. It really takes seriously mental health online as well as our mental health offline, as we see that this is going to be our new reality for some time now.
You're absolutely right that when we think about technology and virtual environments, even this summit We know that these sorts of platforms will continue to be part of how we will function as a global community. And so we're going to start to turn ourselves a bit now to say, those of you who are advocates, activists, leaders of organizations working with youth, what are the effective ways to support youth during these challenging times? And so, Sherry, we know that through your organization, Love Your Skin, Appreciate Your Melanin, you have advocated for working with youth to help them be more accepting of who they are. And we'd like to hear you talk about that work and what it is that you do to support young people. What works?
Thank you for that question. So I started Love Your Skin, Appreciate Your Melanin because this came from, my own experience with skin bleaching, from a predominantly Black country, from a Black community, from, like a Black school, people telling me that, you're Black and ugly and stuff like that. So I basically inculcated those negativities about me, and you having people to basically tell me who I am, how far I can go with my life and stuff like that. No, it was really self-hate, because if my family telling me that I'm ugly, of course I'm ugly. If my neighbors telling me I'm ugly, of course I'm ugly. So it was more self-hate, trying to fit in and trying to be attractive, to my male counterparts. Now, when I bleach my skin, my self-esteem, it didn't assisted, to improving my self-esteem. Now, with Love Your Skin, I look at the fact that, at my age of 11, when I started bleaching, I had no one to talk to. So I know that there are young girls today who they're going through similar situations. So by just going into different schools and speaking to them, through the mentorship program, I have like 5 mentees that I speak to at least once per week, just encouraging them to just believing in themselves, looking at what they have, what kind of value they can add to society, and focus less on your skin complexion. Because earlier we mentioned domestic violence, and the reality is that these things, they come from the home. Because if you see your father beating your Black mother, or a son sees his father doing that, he thinks it's the norm, it's the best thing to do, because that's how you show her some sort of love, right? So by telling them, certain things about loving themselves, being the best version of themselves, it is very important. And during COVID-19, I can't really go into the schools and stuff like that, but through social media, I've been having, different melanin competitions, like essay competitions, asking them to write about, just being Black. What is it that, that is so good about being Black? And through my Melanin Mondays Instagram Live, what I've been doing is just showcasing the talents and skills of our kings and queens in different social spaces, and how they've basically moved beyond their circumstances to become who they are today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Your message inspires. Thank you. I'd like each of our panelists to take a minute or two. What is it that you do that brings solutions and brings health and creates greater opportunity for mental well-being of youth and particularly girls and women? What do you recommend, and what do you want the audience that's listening to you today to remember?
If I can go ahead, if it's general question, I think to help women or girls is always have contact with them, discussion, showing love, showing support by calling each other at this COVID time. If the COVID is gone, then to have like focus group or group meeting, women discussion group meeting, share experiences, and talk about subject that you cannot talk outside, and then build the skill of the young girl. As my predecessor was saying, for the girl, to empower them, you have to show them positive attitude. Let them know that you can explain your own experience to them, and because this is what I was doing for HIV/AIDS. To be able to understand a subject, you have to put yourself into it. If I said you have to put yourself into it, it doesn't mean you have to go get infected with HIV in order to understand HIV people or HIV positive client. But you have to go and then learn from them, as well as you pass your own experience to them. So together, you will be able to work positively and then to give sense of life of the person. Because if like bleaching your skin, you think you're gonna be more visible by men because you are not doing it for your own sake of beauty, but you are doing for someone else to love you. Is it necessary to do that? So you have to show example. You have to be with them. You have to chat. You have to bring them to you, not to discriminate them, not to stigmatize them, not to judge them as well. I think this way we will be able to change positively.
If I could add to that, I think one of the things
please
that's
do. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I think one of the things that's really important too is really considering the lack of mental health resources and mental health practitioners that we often see in Black and Afro-descendant communities. I think it's really important that resources be put to train more health providers, more mental health support in culturally relevant, culturally competent ways. But I also think that as we think about what our communities need, I think it's important that we also recognize that many Afro-descendant communities also use Afro-religious healing practices and practitioners as mental health support as well. And we need to amplify and support that work. I think oftentimes we assume that just having a degree makes someone an expert, but our communities often have had to rely on homegrown knowledge and homegrown support. And that support doesn't get the same kind of financial, emotional resources as someone that might have an educational background. So as important as it is to train more Black and brown folks to be culturally competent mental health experts, I also think we need to amplify the work that's already being done in these communities from our ancestral practices that have been supporting us for generations as well.
It's an important to broaden the resources available. Yes, Jamaica.
I would add to what France said, which I think is exactly what we need to do, everything she said. Because in my field, of course, we have a shortage of practitioners and we do need more of them, but healing does not only come through mental health therapy. It could come for some in their religious practices. It could come from them in alternative healing, such as Indigenous Native American practices. It could come from lots of different ways. And one of the things that we've been talking about more in psychology is about this radical healing for women of color and what that looks like. And for us, it could be very ancestral. It could be getting in touch with our ancestors and things that they did to find healing that may not be mainstream, but may be effective for us and may be healing for us. Journaling would be an example of that. Getting more in touch with some of your past and some of your experiences and how you feel the way you feel. But one of the ways we can do that is to increase peer support. So we can support each other more. We can embrace the idea of community more. What does that look like after COVID? As far as getting together, especially working moms and moms who do need more support. They need assistance as far as their childcare responsibilities. One of the things we can do as a community is to encourage more men to be involved in their homes with their children and to embrace childcare as well. So that it takes some of the burden off of the women. So I would definitely point more to community education for men, peer support, and of course, training more practitioners so that we can help people in the more Western way of helping in a mental health way, because there is a place for that as well. And everyone is different. It depends on how you find relief and healing. But I think there are multiple ways to do that.
Well, you have enriched our understanding of the importance of this topic. We thank each one of you for the leadership and the advocacy the passion you bring to the work that you are doing on behalf of those who are in greatest need. And you have helped us to understand why that is the case historically and what it is about the COVID-19 situation that has made this situation much more dire, and how our recovery from COVID-19 must put a high priority on the mental health of girls and women in ways that perhaps we aren't truly aware. Sarah, is there a word that you would like to say in the closing out of this panel?
Thank you, Beth. Before I make my statement, Sherry, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I want to say something.
Me? Yes.
It was me.
It was you?
Yeah, it
because
was.
she turned off her microphone. That's why I'm asking her.
No, like I wanted to say also, we should keep in consideration or like understanding the mental health in cultural way. This is very important. Like as what is her name? Said she's the psychologist. She said like to work on that. She might be probably one of 10 or something like that, being Black and having that experience. Is not everywhere you can find that, because culturally mental health, if you ask an African person, for example, for mental health, and then say, okay, I'm seeing this sign, A, B, C, D, you name them, the person will say, okay, what is she talking about? Or what is he talking about? Because I'm not crazy. This is the way people understand. I'm not crazy. So to be crazy, you have to be on the street, walking naked or talking by yourself, loudly and screaming. This is the way, like culturally, they see mental health issue. They don't see like mental health, but for them is craziness, which is like different having mental health issue. So we have to find that nuance and then try to take it out apart and be able to help and support people who are suffering silently due to mental health issues or COVID-19 or HIV/AIDS.
And just to reiterate what Fanta said, right? In Jamaica, you know, for someone to openly say that I'm having a mental health issue, or for the practitioners to go to a family and say your child is having mental health issues, you know, it's a big problem. It's like you're trying to look down on my child. So there should be the willingness of families to accept, you know, that their child is going through this. And we can do that through social marketing campaigns, you know, encouraging families from the different geographical domains to come in, you know, report it, seek help. Because the truth is, if we have a population where mental health is very high, then talks about sustainable development, it really makes no sense. So that the level of social marketing campaigns we need to roll out locally and across the diaspora, you know, is very important.
So thank you so much. And Sarah, I think that what we really should do to close out the panel, you've done it so well, Sherry and Fanta, thank you so much, is to move along with our program now. And I believe if technology works in our favor, we have two short videos, one by from South Africa and one from Jamaica, that will urge all of the viewers and all of you who are with us today to raise a red card against all forms of violence and discrimination against girls and women. Thank you, distinguished panelists. This has been a wonderful conversation.
And that's how long it's taken me to give a red card to all forms of discrimination and violence against women and children across the world. We know that in South Africa, we continue to be haunted by hashtags, am I next? and movements that showcase women who have brutally been murdered at the hands of men. Siyoyika singabafazi base-South Africa. Inhliziyo zethu zibuhlungu. We ask that the men of South Africa stand with us in saying we give a red card to gender-based violence in South Africa. For this is a fight we can't fight alone, and we challenge you as our fathers, brothers, uncles to isolate the perpetrators around you, to isolate those guilty that you know so that they don't feel comfortable in your presence. How long will we continue to hashtag am I next, to live in fear, and for this to be an issue that supposedly has no consequence in South Africa? We can't wait for leadership to stand with us. We in society need to take that stand together and fight it. See Misengembambo in South Africa and make this country uncomfortable and the men who are guilty of such uncomfortable. Enough is enough.
Hey everybody, this is Shaggy. Let's give a red card to all kind of violence against women and children. I want everybody to go click on redcardpledge.com and get involved. Sign up everybody. And we all got to do whatever we can. Much love.
On behalf of Sarah Bronco and Arden, we are pleased to come to almost the close of today's session. What we have done is we have gathered partners on this day, the Republic of Costa Rica, the United Nations Population Fund, the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women, UN Women in other words, and the African Renaissance and Diaspora Network. We have convened this third summit on the topic of mental health. Focused on COVID-19 and mental health, this summit, with the support of the U.S. African and Development Fund Foundation, was put together and convened in close collaboration with the National Council for Negro Women and Webster University. I will say as an aside that I have great gratitude to my colleagues, faculty, staff, and students at Webster University who have engaged so many students in raising the red card, and we invite all of you to join us. This summit on COVID-19 and mental health occurred within the convening on the occasion of the 65th Commission on the Status of Women. You've heard the context today. It was informed by and celebrated by the United Nations, establishing March 21st as the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, as well as, of course, the commemoration of International Women's Day on March 8th. Importantly, the 1995 Beijing Declaration affirmed that the intersectionality of gender and racial discrimination causes a high vulnerability and systemic violations of the rights of women and girls in all the areas of social life. Therefore, discussing the issues of gender and race in March is particularly symbolic, especially in the time of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has disproportionately affected women and girls. This third Women of the Diaspora Summit, COVID-19 and Mental Health, should draw attention to SDG 3, Good Health and Well-Being, in order to advance programs towards gender and racial equality and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This summit on COVID-19 and mental health focused on how women of the diaspora are among people living in the most threatening mental health conditions as a result of historical racial and gender discrimination and exacerbated by the stress and anxiety triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic. Intergenerational speakers, we have been privileged to hear them today from across the diaspora, address the specific mental health threats to women, such as unemployment, gender-based violence, motherhood and racial and gender discrimination, as well as best practices that will improve women's mental health in the face of COVID-19 challenges. And now, Sarah, please finish Arden's call to action as a result of today's summit.
Thank you, Beth. Sign the ARDN Red Card Pledge to end all forms of discrimination and violence against women and girls to achieve the goal of 1 million signatures by December 1st, 2021. Demand accountability for international commitments addressing women's mental and emotional health, well-being and safety, including the Beijing Platform for Action, the International Conference of Population Development ICPD Program of Action, the Nairobi Summit on ICPD Plus 25 Commitments, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and the series of conventions on gender equality concluded under the auspices of the International Labour Organization. Invest time, expertise, and financial resources in organizations and agencies that work to reduce gender-based discrimination and violence. Assure that girls and women have equitable access to mental health care and education and enjoy the same rights, opportunities, and benefits of childhood that boys do. Assure that girls and women with mental health disabilities have access to support and dignified care at all levels, including at the community level. Speak out and safeguard women from every form of violence in the workplace, including psychological and emotional harassment and abuse. Assure that mental health services are available to women and encourage women to seek mental health services. Integrate mental health services into primary healthcare systems and train primary health workers to care for girls and women of all ages who have experienced any form of violence or psychological trauma, including trauma resulting from conflict, natural hazards, environmental degradation, and public health epidemics. Promote general understanding that marginalization, powerlessness, poverty, along with overwork and stress, the growing incidence of intimate partner and domestic violence, as well as substance abuse, are often related and cause mental health disorders. Identify and condemn the systematic practice of rape and other forms of inhumane and degrading treatment of women as a deliberate instrument of war and ethnic cleansing, and take steps to ensure that full assistance is provided to the survivors of such abuse for their physical and mental rehabilitation. Denounce all sexual and gender-based abuse, physical, psychological, social, and economic, trafficking women and girls, and other forms of abuse and sexual exploitation that place girls and women at high risk of mental trauma, along with stigma, often deters women from using mental health services. Protect and incorporate into national legislation the right of every woman and girl to enjoy the highest attainable standard of mental health. Move state actors to expand enforce policies that advance the goals of this call to action. Actively engage in the Generation Equality Forum and its lead up, including the hashtag Act for All Equal campaign, to make sure that the perspectives are fully reflected in the forum. Support the mobilization of ambitious commitments by governments, private sectors, UN entities, civil society, and other actors in the Action Coalition, which will be the outcome of the Generation Equality Forum. That being said, I will pass the floor to Dr. Jibril for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Such a wonderful panel. Excellent panelists, very good co-moderation. Thank you so much. For us at the African Renaissance and Diaspora Network, it has been a big challenge to organize this summit within the framework of a platform where you have 25,000 registered people, 700 events. Before I go anywhere, I would like to extend a warm thank you to my colleagues at the African Renaissance and Diaspora Network, who have worked tirelessly to make this event what it is today. I'm very, very proud and very happy to be associated with such an outstanding team. I would like also, on behalf of the co-organizers of the third Women of the Diaspora Summit, to thank each and every one of you for joining us today for this important topic of COVID-19 and mental health. The disproportionate burden that COVID-19 has had on women and girls, in addition to the systemic discrimination suffered by women and girls, has had an impact on their mental health, on their mental well-being. It is therefore important for all of us to ensure that all levels of society support the mental health and well-being of women and girls, and that they have access to adequately provided mental health services without stigma. It is also important to understand that mental health challenges is a human condition that every person is susceptible to. We all face these challenges in some form at one point or another in our lives. If you are facing any challenges to your mental well-being, please know that you are strong, you are not alone, and you have the power to overcome. We have heard about the importance of ensuring accountability for international commitments made by our leaders addressing the empowerment of women and girls. These commitments include the Beijing Platform for Action, the Nairobi ICPD plus 25 commitments. We should also be looking forward to the Generation Equality Forum and the commitment that will be made there. Dear participants, a person's mental health is tied to other aspects of his or her life. To support the mental health of women and girls, it is critical that women and girls are uplifted in every aspect of their lives. We need to speak out and safeguard women and girls against those who would do them harm. And this harm, as you all know through the discussion today, this harm comes in many forms. There could be psychological, there could be physical, there could be social and economic. It is a human right to be able to make real choices about what one is able to do with their minds and their bodies. Women everywhere in the world are still unable to enjoy this fundamental right. This needs to change. Let's again remember that Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and right. It is our job to make sure that this is not just a right, but this is a reality. If you have not already done so, you can sign the Red Card pledge to put an end to all forms of discrimination and violence against women and girls. And we need, again, to have at least 1 million signatures by November 2022, which is the start of the FIFA World Cup in Qatar. You can go online and sign on www.redcardpledge.com. Thank you, and we look forward to joining us at the next Women of the Diaspora Summits. Thank you very much, and that brings to an end this amazing and exciting summit. Thank you again.